Okay, guys, go to your seats, please. We're ready for the next session, so please take your seats. Okay, so next up is Adam.
All right.
People in the back, please take seats. Thank you.
Who here thinks anonymous Bitcoin is a good idea? Hands up. It's a lot more than I expected. So who here values his own privacy? Even more. Guess what? You have a right for that, because privacy is a fundamental human right, and anonymity is just another word for that. In fact, fungibility is an essential property of good money. Since the invention of Bitcoin, numerous fungibility technologies has been proposed. However, none of them address the issue in full. Something always was out of its scale. As a result, there is no end-to-end solution. Today, we cannot transact with Bitcoin in an anonymous way. ZeroLink evaluates all the research to date and combines them in a coherent and practical way. So it's not rocket science. But before getting into it, I was informed that the topic of this Breaking Bitcoin conference is slightly narrowed down and focusing strictly on security. So I must establish a connection between privacy and security. Here's my attempt. Imagine you are the owner of the Alpha Bay. In this case, your security, your privacy is your top priority, because you don't want to end up in a Thai prison cell dead. It's important for your physical security. But in other ways, as Jimmy Song mentioned before, that if you have money, you better hide it, because you're going to be a target of hackers. All right. So you have to read every line in this slide. just kidding, it's just a brain dump. And now I'm going to give envelopes to people, and later it will have significance. There is a paper in the envelopes, and you have to write down the address where you want to send Bitcoin. We're not going to send Bitcoin, so you can write down like anything if you want me to sign it. So my point is, there is a lot of research being done, and we're still not able to transact with Bitcoin in an anonymous way. What can we do about it? ZeroLink is using a lot of this research, and it wants to use even more. However, they are either too complicated, so wallet's not going to adopt it, or they are just not in Bitcoin yet. And ZeroLink is compatible with all the mixing techniques what we have today. All right, so ZeroLink defines a pre-mix, a post-mix wallet, and a mixing technique. Pre-mix wallet can be any Bitcoin wallet. However, pre- and post-mix wallets can be the same wallet too. It's a quick overview. Premix wallets has a very few privacy requirements. Postmix wallets has very strict privacy requirements. It will make sense, don't worry. What do we have today? We have Bitcoin mixers, traditional Bitcoin mixers, and shared coin. These are mixing this way. So Alice, Greg, Satoshi, Roger put some money into the mix, and we have no idea that whose money, what's coming out of the mix. Well, this is flawed because amount analysis can establish very easily. And traditional Bitcoin mixers transactions can be fined based on how they are signing the transactions and what fees they are using. So those transactions can be easily mined the blockchain. So what do we need here? We need fixed denominations for the mixers. And this will lead us to rounds of mixing. If we use fixed denomination, then we are not going to know that who is sending to who. So there is something here that we know that Greg is participated in the first and the second mix, but where do we know that? It's based on how Bitcoin works. Every Bitcoin transaction, at least a lot of them, generates some change. So we are gonna see that the same person participated in the pre-mix level in one mix. This looks great because no one knows what happens, whose money after the mix, whose outputs are there. However, what happens after the mix can ruin this scheme. What do we have here? We have coin shuffle plus, Xiaomi and coin join, Tumbler bits, classic Tumbler mode. These are the more serious implementations of mixers, which cares about rounds and not ruining the scheme this way. However, all of them has out of its scope what happens after the mix. For example, if Satoshi joins its inputs together later, which wallets do when they don't have enough money, then we know that Satoshi was the only one who participated in all three mix. So it must be Satoshi. Similarly, we can say which is Greg because only Greg and Satoshi participated in the first mix. Greg joins together, and we de-anonymized everything. And this is something what no mixing techniques cares about today because it's hard enough to build a mixing technique, not like caring about wallet parameters. This is the problem. And now let's see how ZeroLink handles it. So we said we can use ZeroLink with any mixing technique. However, I found its own mixing technique, which will be called Chaumian coin join. And basically, it's much faster and cheaper than other mixing techniques and very easy to implement. So coin join is when multiple people joining their inputs together. And as we said, we need fixed denominations. So the outputs are going to be 1 Bitcoin denomination. And the changes will be known that whose changes that. So this is basically coin join. But how to coordinate the people, how to coordinate. And actually, in 2013, Gregory Maxwell provided a solution, but no one seemed to care about it or see it. But he actually provided, and we call it Chaumian coin join. I'm going to present you the oversimplified protocol. I gave the envelopes. What we are going to do is blinding it. What does blinding mean? Put the paper into the envelopes and seal it. That's what's blinding a Bitcoin address or anything. All right, now give it to me, and I'm going to sign it. As you see, there is a hole on the envelope. Everyone sealed it, so I don't really know what I'm signing, but I'm blindly signing the envelopes. And I should be able to give back the envelopes to everyone, the same envelopes, but it doesn't really matter. So they provided me a blinded destination address and an input for their transactions. I am the tumbler, or rather a coordinator. And I gave back the signed blinded destination address, and they change their anonymity network identity, for example, a new Tor circuit, which means you have to give it to another person, and give me back the envelopes. So first give it to someone else. That represents changing another anonymity network identity. And now, give me back. All right, so what just happened here? I blindly signed the addresses where they want to send the money. And now they give it back, but I don't know whose address is this. And it is signed by me. So now I have all the inputs, what's needed for the CoinJoin transaction, and I have all the outputs, what's needed for that. And now I cannot de-anonymize my users. That's the basic of Xiaomi and CoinJoin. There is a simplified protocol. Yes, I can build a transaction and propagate it. There is a simplified protocol which I'm not going to go into because of time. Amir is probably here. All right. Anyway, and there is a full protocol. Why does it get more complicated? Because we have to defend timing, DOS, and Sybil attacks, and we have to achieve liquidity and optimize a little bit performance to be stronger. So what does it result? Just as a comparison, we had Tumblebit's classic Tumbler mode. It takes over 2 hours around. With Xiaomi and CoinJoin, it takes a couple of seconds. We have, in Tumblebit's classic Tumbler mode, we need 4 transactions for a round. In Xiaomi and CoinJoin, it's not even 1. The size of the transaction will be a little less than 1. So, and we have a premix wallet. Premix wallet has very few privacy requirements. Pre and postmix wallets can be the same. We need an extended public key of the postmix wallet. So from there we can generate the output addresses of the mix. And the only privacy requirement is to not share with any third party the extended public key. Basically, it would be great if we would integrate, if we would make every Bitcoin wallet a premix wallet. We would have anonymous Bitcoin. So, what's going on with postmix wallets? It has a lot of requirements. Coin selection. As we saw before, we cannot join inputs together, which will degrade the user experience greatly. But there are a few UX recommendations that we could do. We could do Bitcoin Core's coin control features. I think most of us are familiar with it here. However, it would change in a way that we would actually not enable joining inputs together in this coin control feature. There are small changes, small change outputs, which we cannot do anything with, only de-anonymize ourselves. Those small changes can be donated or visualized transaction history. We could replace the old transaction history, transaction ID, and amount in out with some visualized way. That would be great. There is also the debt change attack, what doesn't affect the mix, but affects the people. You're doing Bitcoin transactions, and for example, the first Bitcoin transaction of yours is selling some coins at the Medcox. You get know your customer, and you are using the change to buy alpaca socks at the Silk Road. Now you are connected together. What can we do about it? Some smart labeling system that encourages the users to not to join together their transactions. That would be great. What is important here is how we are broadcasting transactions. There is a proposal called Dandelion, which might be great in the future, but for now we can only do it over Tor. Preferably we do a Tor circuit change between every transaction broadcasting. There is private transaction retrieval, which is very important and very hard to fix. What's happening is a lot of Bitcoin wallets ask a centralized server that what are my balance? What is my balance? What is the balance of my addresses? So this way we connect together our addresses in the eyes of the centralized server. And this is why, for example, shared coin was flawed a little bit because blockchain info can de-anonymize it anytime. We have the SPV Bloom filtering wallet, which seems much better. At least it seemed in 2012. Hey, what are the balances of the addresses this pattern fits to? It seems good, but later they found it not that good. Nick Jonas from Blockstream said and showed in his research that if you give me one of your public key, then I will find 70% of your SPV wallet. Now it was 2015 and it was not by a blockchain analysis company, it was just a research. It is probably much worse, and this 70% is not a good number because this is what he can find now, but if you keep transacting, that number will grow potentially, I don't know, 95 or something, because he can then analyze his future transactions. What is a good way using Bitcoin Core or Armory as a full node? This way, you're asking the Bitcoin network that give me all the transactions you have. No one has any idea which transactions you are interested in. Or we can use full SPV node, which says give me all the transactions you have from the creation of my wallet, which is basically just as good as the full node. However, it's easier to use. We still have to wait for syncing times. Block size increase, of course, doesn't have it, but it's more usable. There are currently 3 wallets. One is Jonas Schnelli's Bitcoin Core proposal, pull request, and I don't know, I guess that's stalling. Other one is I call my wallet hidden wallet. Do not use it on the mainnet. I don't know what SegWit2x will do with it, and it's experimental. And Strat is Breeze wallet, which is basically the same as my hidden wallet. That's also only testnet enabled yet. We are getting there. And there are some other ways to do things. We can basically conduct a small blockchain analysis on the Xiaomi and CoinJoin output transactions, and that way we could send the wallet clients much less transactions, and it will be much faster. And there are some other things like fee estimation and others that are important. So all the Postmix wallet implementations should work in the same way. So it should not be that in one round only one person uses one Postmix wallet, because that way that person would be de-anonymized because that's using only that wallet. And what wallets are interested in it? One is Samurai wallet. TDevD, Samurai wallet developer, was actually a contributor to the Zero-Link paper, but you can find it on GitHub, Nopara73 per Zero-Link. And Strat is Breeze wallet too. I just a week ago went to work for Stratis on Breeze wallet, and we decided we are going to implement the first Postmix wallet. And when I leave there, I'm going to implement the Xiaomi CoinJoin part. And on hidden wallet, I am planning to do some advanced stuff later, 1 year later or something like that. But for now, we only want to have one Postmix wallet, because it's kind of like Bitcoin core development. You really have to, Postmix wallets really have to work in the same way. All right. So what I would like to see is after the first implementations of Zero-Link, it would be great if every Bitcoin wallet, at least the open source ones, add a premix wallet feature for premix wallet add-on for it. And this is basically the only shame what looks at every aspect of privacy loss and enables fully anonymous usage of Bitcoin. The end.
Questions?
Hi. So you're saying that Zero-Link will improve fungibility of the Bitcoin network or make it fungible. But in my opinion, like you said, it can only work if everybody is using it. But the fact that there are already people trying to keep a clear record of their coins and not mixing them for regulatory purposes and so on, and for tax purposes, I don't think that will happen. And actually, you'll segregate the network. You'll basically make dark bitcoins and white bitcoins, making the fungibility issue worse by doing this?
It happens anyway. It just what kind of marketing team you have. You will always have dirty bitcoins, even if you're using Bitcoin mixers or anything.
Hey, so could you maybe say a thing or two on your opinion on how confidential transactions like G. Maxwell's work relates to coin joins in general, or what's the advantages or disadvantages of them?
Yes, they are basically masking the amounts. So what the end result is, we don't need rounds and we can send any amount from there. However, they are costly. They are costly. I guess 10 times more expensive, more in size than a normal output. So that will come with costs, which might require some trade-off, might not. We will see.
Any other question? Where? Yeah.
Hi. Is the intent that the mixing is only one directional, or are you expecting this to be implemented as the post wallet being sort of a separate breaking the links environment? It wasn't clear whether the...
Yes, one directional,
Yeah.
but I don't really see any other way to create a fully link-breaking environment in Bitcoin. People say there are, but there aren't. I see all of them.
So the upshot is that once you have put your coins into the post wallet, they will stay there
Yes,
under the operations.
exactly.
We still have some time for another question. Not very far.
Hey, thanks for the talk. So with your with ZeroLink, there's the thing that it needs fixed transaction amounts, and could you talk a bit about how? So obviously fungibility is an important property of money, but divisibility is as well. Could you talk a bit about how it would work that, like, if it only works for 1 Bitcoin or 0.1 Bitcoin, how would it work if someone buys Bitcoin and it ends up being 0.17 or some other number?
Sorry again.
So ZeroLink would work with fixed divisions.
Yes.
Like all the coin joins have to have the same amount.
Yes.
And if someone buys a Bitcoin that's not one of those divisions, then how could you tell us how your wallet would deal with that?
If you have 8 Bitcoins, then you must conduct 8 rounds. That's it.
Okay, last one.
Hi. So my question would be, in the presence of alternative coins that focus on anonymity, such as Zcash or Monero or Dash, is it really practical for Bitcoin to try to improve the privacy problem? I mean, you are making trade-offs here, and probably the transactions will require more fees or be less efficient. Would it maybe make more sense, how do you think, to kind of keep privacy level of Bitcoin on the kind of medium level, because not users really need it, and leave the strict privacy-preserving transactions to altcoins that specialize on it and use specialized cryptography for it?
Yes, it's a very important topic. So there might be sidechains or altcoins with atomic swaps, whatever we have, and we can transact there anonymously. For example, Mimblewimble or Tumbleweed's payment hub mode. However, there will always be a need for on-chain privacy. The entrance and the exit transactions are going to happen on-chain. For example, you can use Monero, but eventually you want to use the Lightning Network too, so you must put it on and off-chain your coins.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't think Amir is here yet. That's right. So we are going to move to the lightning panel first. And then we'll see. If he shows up, he will go after. And if not, we would be very sorry about that. So to the lightning panel, so we'll welcome Elizabeth, Laulu, Fabrice, and Christian. And the moderator will be Patrick.
Okay, so I would like you guys to introduce yourselves, I guess. Well, everyone knows who you are already, I guess, but... We can do quick. Yeah, so do quick introductions.
Hello? Oh, hey, I'm Laulu. I work on Lightning stuff. I'm like the developer of L&D, one of the implementations. We do like the spec stuff as well, and I'm co-founder of Lightning Labs.
Hey everyone, Elizabeth, also co-founder of Lightning Labs, huge fan of the Lightning Network, and so excited to hear everybody talking about it today. So now we finally get the panel where we get to really go in depth.
Hi, I'm Fabrice. I'm one of the co-founders of A5, and we develop our own Lightning implementation, and that's it.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm the only non-founder here, apparently. And I work for Blockstream with Rusty on the C Lightning implementation and on the specification as well.
That's awesome. And just in case nobody knows, I'm Patrick McQuarrie, and I work at UCL. So the first question I want to ask you guys, it's more about like collaboration and standards. So how do you guys collaborate and agree on standards so the 2-3 software implementations can communicate? I'll go up the recipe first.
Okay. So I think our process is like pretty similar to the way like Bitcoin operates in terms of like we talk on IRC, we have a development mailing list. I guess as of late, most of it has been concentrated on the GitHub repo that we have, which is like Lightning RFC, and that basically is all the documents describing how Lightning worked exactly. Because initially the paper kind of covered mostly the core design of the commitment structure, but didn't say how do the peers find each other, what do the messages look like, how do you open a channel. That's what we've been working on for the past like year or so, because the devil's in the details, right? So we had to actually work on all this stuff, but generally we kind of operate on like rough consensus. We we have some calls every now and then. We talk on IRC, and I guess I can talk as well.
Yeah, one thing that I really love about the Lightning Network community is everyone's super friendly, and we actually all pretty much get along, which is amazing. In Bitcoin, right? When does that ever happen? Thank you. So as Laulu mentioned, we have actually Rusty, I believe, initially started these calls every 2 weeks for people that are involved in the protocol and the spec. And that's open if anybody wants to join the process and work on the protocol. Talk to us afterward. And we've all been working toward interoperability because we want multiple implementations to talk to each other. I believe there was some recent really cool progress in terms of getting things even more interoperable, and we'll be working until it's fully interoperable.
Okay, nothing
else. Do you want to talk about your site? The testing site.
Oh yeah, I basically use the C Lightning integration testing framework to spin up a few nodes of L&D and Eclair and just test against those as well. So things are looking good, and we're getting more and more green every day. Yeah. Green being good in this case.
So have you had much experience where you changed some messages, for example, in your code and you became incompatible with Eclair, or?
Oh yeah, we just had a few changes last week where Rosebeef and I were hacking together, and we noticed that we disagreed on a few serialization issues, and so we looked at the spec, and we basically had to change some of the C Lightning stuff. So we broke compatibility with Eclair again, but it's minor changes, and I'll tell you later what it is, and we can get it done again. I can implement them for you as well if you want. It's Scala. It's my game, yeah. No, it's basically just byte ordering stuff and that kind of thing. So it's really minor. at this point. Eclair has done a really great job at creating compatibility with C Lightning. Sadly, also copying some of our mistakes. So.
Just one thing I'd like to add, because it might not be obvious for everyone, but we talked about different implementations and whether it's a good thing or not for Bitcoin. But Lightning is a very different problem. For Bitcoin, it's a question because you have to reach global consensus. All nodes need to agree on the same results. Lightning is very different. It's more standard client-server protocols. So you can actually have a spec and implementations, and it's a good thing because the exchanges between two nodes have no impact on the rest of the network. There's no global consensus. So that's why we are trying to define a spec and have different implementations. It's really not the same problem as multiple implementations for Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, that's one of the huge advantages of this whole layer 2 movement. It's basically that we do not require compatibility on this global consensus level anymore, but we can actually really do quick development of new technologies, and the only thing we need is to settle on Bitcoin, which is what our global state is in the end. So.
Yeah, and the way I usually refer to it is on Lightning, you can have local consensus between participants, but obviously the global consensus is achieved on the underlying lower blockchain.
Yeah, and then I guess as far as like spec stuff, we're kind of like working on like slowing down a little bit in terms of like freezing the changes. So we're not doing like any major breaking changes. But if we see something, you know, about like compatibility or maybe some new security fixes, maybe we'll add those in. But we're kind of like, you know, kind of like freezing that so we can work on interoperability and really start to roll this stuff out.
Okay, well, speaking of consensus anyway, now that we have SIGWit, we know that we can have like new components for Lightning. Is there any upcoming changes that you guys are excited for? For example, like Schnorr signatures or... and how this might help Lightning. For Lightning, I mean, so new consensus rules in Bitcoin, like having Schnorr signatures, how could this benefit the Lightning network?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start on Schnorr first. I mean, so Schnorr, what it can let us do, we can aggregate these signatures, and you know, in the future where everyone's using kind of like this like new Schnorr pub key type, that's cool because then it can allow us to like allow channels to look just like regular you know, transactions that are spending each other. So we kind of like blend with an anonymity set, and then I guess beyond that, like Johnson Lau recently dropped like 5 bips basically. And, like when I was reading it, I was like exploding with ideas. So like, but like basically covenants can help a lot. He has this new massive that can help a lot. Doing things around like more flexible stake hash types can help a lot. And by help, I guess mainly meaning in terms of flexibility and also reducing the amount of storage that nodes have to actually store. So one example is right now we use this like 2-layer HTLC construct where the HTLCs now, when you want to claim them, are actually individual transactions that would get broadcast. And we basically mimic covenants by having these be pre-signed off-chain, right? And that requires us to store signatures for every HTLC. While if we have proper covenants where we can actually you know, constrain what the transaction spending them looks like, we don't need that signature storage, right? And that's, you know, that's a scalability win because now you have less node storage and you have you know, it's less critical for you to lose data essentially in that state. And there are a few other ones along that, but I think mostly it's about like reducing storage, but also we have additional opcodes. We can do fancier contracts, and maybe these guys have some other things as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about the whole masked idea because it basically allows us to hide our activity a bit better because currently our P2SH scripts are pretty much identify us as Lightning transactions. So if somebody doesn't like Lightning for whatever reason whatsoever, they could start censoring us. Whereas with the masked proposals, we can basically make all of our transactions look like any other transaction as well. So we get this indistinguishability from other stuff as well.
Okay, and speaking about privacy as well, so I know there's some criticism where if you're reading a payment and you're using the hash, so hash time lock contracts, you can lose some privacy because some hops can try to work out that they're on the same route twice, etc. And I know there's a line of work to do a discrete log-based solution where that's no longer a problem. Do you see that as like a real threat? And do you think moving on to the discrete log solution, it might be a bit more complicated? Do you think it's worth the complexity?
Yeah, I say it's definitely worth it. It's not that much more complex, but I think it's something that we talked about in the mailing list like a year or two ago, and like we're pretty well aware of it. And I guess recently we've seen some papers. People have like fleshed out some of the stuff in the mailing list into kind of more concrete forms in these like academic papers. One of them, covered this and some like results around concurrency. But yeah, so I think that we all agree basically if we can continue to improve the privacy of the system itself, then we'll go towards that. I guess if people that aren't aware, the issue is that right now with the payment hash, it's the same along the entire route. So therefore, if you have multiple individuals along a route, you can correlate that. You say, oh, this is the thing from 3 hops ago. While if we can randomize them to make them all indistinguishable, then it looks like you're just forwarding anything else. So ideally, each participant just forwards these packets, which are completely indistinguishable from everybody else, aside from payment values. But then, so, it's going to be a war, really. There's this thing and the next thing and the next thing. But I think we're going to like do it one battle at a time.
Yeah, I guess the residual issue of having the values still sort of look the same is that's a hard one. I don't see a way to remove that without overpaying fees like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, you could say like you do like 200 satoshis at a time, but then that's like even more payments flowing through, and then like you're kind of like wasting people's effort. So yeah, and even if you have things like CT, like you still need to. Commercial transactions, you still need to give away maybe some range information, which then can kind of like restrict, where you're going with the network. So yeah, the whole value thing is it's kind of hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's a huge problem anyway, because the only thing that you basically get when forwarding a payment is I got it from left and I will forward it to right. So if I'm in a route multiple times, then I can't know how many hops are before me, I can't know how many hops are after me, and I also can't know how many hops are between me. So unless you're...
That's called onion routing, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you. It wasn't for me, it's because I implemented it. So yeah, onion routing being the buzzword of the day. Sphinx, if you want to be peculiar. So you can basically say, okay, I got this payment twice, but I don't know where it's coming from and I don't know where it's going, so yay.
Okay, so I'm going to move on a little bit. So because we're now touching on a bit of research, there's been lots of research now on payment channels, and one line of research is use trusted hardware. As we know, after yesterday's talk by Daniel, that SGX has a lot of problems here, but if you assume trusted hardware is actually trustworthy and can be used, what benefit, like why would you not use trusted hardware? Like, for example, what is the benefit of Lightning instead of trusted hardware?
So I guess, I think the way we're kind of developing now, like we have, diversity of implementations and implementers as well, which gives you a lot of options, and maybe, you want one for the other based on like maybe you're doing an embedded device or so on. But if you have trusted hardware, it kind of like locks you into a particular platform. Like right now I can learn it on my phone, on my laptop, on Windows, whatever. While if I need to have, this like particular Linux laptop with some hardware, then it can become more difficult. I guess you could say maybe they could develop standards that allow them to have attestations across different types of hardware, and that could still kind of work, but then like, you're still kind of locked in to a particular fashion. But if they can make it work, yeah, but still there's trade-offs with it.
Right, I think the goal with Lightning is to be able to work on any type of hardware. Obviously, if it's going to be trusted hardware, that's very specific, and individuals would have to, attain and acquire that. So those are really cool research areas. I know there's a lot going on there, but from our standpoint, we want it to be accessible, regardless of the hardware that you're running.
Let me add a little bit. So I guess for those that don't know, like the solution with trusted hardware is basically that, if I know that we're running the same trusted hardware, I can basically guarantee that they'll never broadcast a prior state, right? So this means I don't need revocations, I don't need all this other stuff. It kind of like really just lets you hack around everything with that. But I think there's some difficulties around that because you need to ensure that it's fully replay protected, because otherwise you can kind of like shut it down and try to make it give you that prior state. And it needs to be resilient to like tamper attacks, and also it needs to kind of have this like persistent monotonic state, which is kind of hard to do properly in hardware in terms of like, does it wear out? How fast can you actually do it? But with that said, I still think that hardware can be helpful in terms of doing key signing on the hardware itself. That allows you to be a little more protected against attacks. And I think maybe we'll have some like future hybrid things where if we can put a little more logic into the hardware to make it a little more intelligent, as far as maybe we can use that for kind of more like access control to kind of validate that where are we sending the money to. Do things like rate limiting, like okay, you can't forward a payment more than like 500 BTC. I mean, well that's a lot of BTC, 500 satoshis. But yeah, things like that.
Just to complement what Laulu just said, there might be a use case for hardware in Lightning right now is for signing, because Lightning transactions have a very specific structure, and they have sequential numbers and so on. And you could use software to sign transactions, but if you want a more secure setup, you might be able to use HSMs basically to sign transactions and lower your exposure.
Yeah, you'd basically push down some of the verification logic down into the HSM, so that you can say, okay, I got a payment A from left, and I know that I can now sign the second part because I'm already assured that the first part is locked in. And for transactions that we ourselves initiate, we have a second screen, for example, in a hardware wallet, where the user actually can sign off on the payment actually being performed. So that's definitely a way to secure the funds that we have to have online to keep our channel open.
Okay, that actually brings me to my next question, which is fantastic. It's to do with private key security. So one problem in Lightning is that if you want to route payments, you have to be online and you have to use a hot wallet, i.e. your private keys need to be on a computer or trusted hardware. Have you guys thought about ways to mitigate theft of coins?
Yeah, so I think there are a few ways. Fabrice was bringing some up like the other day, basically around kind of like segmenting the keys, such that if they get one key, they can't actually get all the money. So one way you can do that is that you have the HTLCs, which are kind of like conditional payments. Then you can have like your settled outputs, which allows me to deliver the payment at any time. If we can segment those keys and they're distinct, such that if I keep the payment key offline, because that's only when I'm settling, and if I get hacked, they can take the HTLCs, which are maybe like very smaller amounts of value. And we can do other things like when you close the channel out, you basically right now, the way it is right now, you basically tell them I want to deliver to this address. What we can do instead is when we open the channel, we can say, oh, we must deliver to this address, which can be in cold storage. And then there's other things that can you can do kind of around creating nested commitments, where maybe one side is hot, one side is cold. You can rotate them out. So I think there's some fancy stuff we can do in the future around that.
So I think there is a common misconception that we'd like people to encourage to have all of their funds online. This is definitely not true. We see Lightning channels basically just as your active funds that you're going to use on a day-to-day activity, and you're definitely not encouraged to put your life savings on a Lightning channel. In fact, we limit the amount that we currently accept for funding transactions to about 42 millisatoshis. That's about $200 in total.
It was lower when we first created it, though.
It was a bit lower, yeah. Back then, we could basically buy a beer with it, and that's it. What's it?
Isn't it like 42 million millisatoshis? Or 16
satoshis? No, it's 4.2 billion millisatoshis. I might be skipping a few zeros because I'm
Do not recommend denominating in millisatoshis. In your brain, I mean.
But it's basically your active funds. You wouldn't run around with your wallet with your life savings on it. So please don't put your life savings on a Lightning channel. Just put whatever you need for your day-to-day activities on a Lightning channel. And but the limit we are imposing can be lifted at any point in time if people worry about us putting this limit in. But for now, it's for your own safety. Just don't lose money.
Right, and I think also users, we know they shouldn't just open one channel. They should have multiple channels open. And then we're also looking into multi-sig and potential constructions that could operate within Lightning around multi-sig and talking to some folks around that. So as Christian mentioned, the idea being that when you have your wallet, you should put relatively small amount. We have the same perspective for the way we're building it right now. And yeah, I think we'll see, evolution of a variety of different ways where people will address this issue. But don't put $1 million in your Lightning channel. Please do that on chain.
Okay, that actually brings me to my next question as well about monitors. So this is like online security we were talking about. So one problem in Lightning is that if I go offline, my payments can be reversed, as in they can close the channel that's based on an earlier revoked state, and they can cancel all the payments, or I guess, get more money than they deserve. What are you guys doing in terms of trying to get around that? Because I remember those monitors, like third parties you could outsource it to monitor the blockchain on your behalf.
So the monitors are already the first step beyond what we currently think people will do. It's basically we have a timeout in which a person A misbehaving node might publish an old state for a channel and cross his fingers that we don't react to it. This timeout period is adjustable, so if I know that I'm online once every 24 hours, I'm happy to set a limit of timeout of 24 hours, because I know that I will be able to react in time. If this is a hardware wallet, which is online once every year, then I will probably set a timeout limit of 1 year so that I can react in time. I probably wouldn't want to open a channel with you then, because my funds might get locked up for a year in the worst case. But there's this tweakable timeout parameter which should ensure that you have enough time to react and punish me if I'm a misbehaving node. What you mentioned is another mechanism where we basically say, okay, we want to have this timeout as small as possible so that people are more likely to open a channel with me, because they don't risk having their funds locked up for a long timeout. So at that point, we basically hand over a fully signed transaction in an encrypted form that punishes misbehaving nodes in the case they are misbehaving, and does nothing if everything is okay. So yeah, that's basically the idea behind these watchtowers.
Oh, watchtowers. That's a better name, watchtowers.
Yeah, that's what Tad calls it, at least, because he did some work around basically like, okay, if we're going to allow these outsourcers to exist, how can we do it such that's a little more private? So he just developed some techniques called like blended outsourcing, which allows you to, we can like do some more randomization on the key, such that it looks like a new state every single time. So there's still some work to be done there around like kind of like specifying what the exact protocol looks like. How do we do compensation for these guys? Like, what's the storage look like? But I think that's like one path that we're going towards there. And like we touched on earlier, if you say we punt such a hardware, that can help out, because it's like a massive hack, so you can do that.
And there's something else. You need to monitor the blockchain only if you receive money. If all you do is paying, then there's no problem. So if you can imagine that mobile wallets or light wallets will just be used by end users to pay for things, and then you don't need to monitor the blockchain, because to broadcast a previous state for the other party would be to lose money. So you can simplify the monitoring use case for mobile wallets, for example.
Okay, so is there any other comments on that topic, or?
I think that in the future also, we can be messing around with like newer channel constructs. Like, Patrick had some things where he combined like a unidirectional channel and bidirectional channel. Like Decker's also had his own duplex thing. So I think in the future it won't just be one channel type. That even in the protocol we'll be adding some kind of like hooks where you can identify, oh, this guy understands channel A, B, C, but not F, and I'll use that instead. So I think in the future it'll be a little bit more heterogeneous. We won't have just one distinct type. And maybe depending on your use case or what you're doing, you'll have one that has some sort of trade-offs from some other channel type.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to real-world use cases. So simplified payment channels, the basic ones using absolute lock times, that's been supported in the protocol since 2015, and they've never really been used. So my questions are, why do you think they've never really been used before? And now that Lightning is going to be built, what use cases do you envision it's going to, like, what type of companies have contacted you and said, Lightning's perfect for what we want to do?
So it's funny because that question actually brings me to how I actually got into Lightning in the first place.
That's awesome.
And was really interested in the concept of payment channels, had talked to friends in the developer community, and I actually remember Peter Todd. Are you still in the room, Peter Todd? Yeah, back there. So end of 2014, I actually tweeted his mailing list post on, which is, by the way, very much not Lightning, his hub and spoke payment channels proposal. And this is before the Lightning paper. I had actually known vaguely about the concept from some of the authors. But and I was wondering, why weren't people building out payment channels implementation? I remember talking to Blue Matt, who had also been interested in it. He had actually talked to, in 2014, folks in the industry, trying to convince them to implement payment channels. And it's kind of just one of these things where maybe its time hadn't come yet, or that people weren't really as knowledgeable about it and they weren't investing in it. And then I think when the Lightning paper kind of hit the community, people then finally realized, the full potential of payment channels and the ramifications that could come along with it. We actually have seen since then some payment channels proposals as well that aren't LN. I'm not sure they've really been adopted though. But yeah, it's just one of those things where its time hadn't come, people weren't investing in it, and really Lightning has this, the trustless scenario, the lack of counterparty risk that I think was superior to previous proposals.
So yeah, I think the Spielmann micropayment channel, for example, I did a few experiments with a few students, a few student projects, but they're sort of limited because you have to fund the maximum amount initially, and they're unidirectional. So they're really just for. They're useful for stuff where you can actually have, where you can do incremental payments, like I'd like to pay my ISP for data traffic I produce, or I have a mesh network and I'll pay that for traffic that I produce. But the venues for these, so the applications for these kinds of payments are rather slim, right? Also because they are unidirectional. Once you have exhausted the capacity of a channel, you have to basically close them again. I like to compare it with a pre-charged debit card, right? It's kind of costly to set up, and once you've exhausted your capacity, then yeah, you're done. You can basically throw it away. And with Lightning, you have far higher utility simply from the funds that you put on, because you can reuse them multiple times. We also have the extension of multi-hop routing, which was not so popular, I guess, with the unidirectional channels, and it's just a convergence of different technologies that comes together and create something which is bigger than the individual parts.
So what about like real world? So have any companies contacted you and said Lightning is perfect for what we want to do? So what's like the vision for the future of how this works?
Yeah, I think there are a few cool use cases. Like one example, just like off the top of my head, is kind of doing kind of a like a metered API service. Typically, the API services you basically have either you have like a free tier or you have like a subscription tier, right? So one way you can do it is you can actually like do like pay per call. So I could have something like I'm doing like translating like Chinese to English or something like that. I can actually do that incrementally. This is like kind of like a little bit sweet spot between me having like a fully free service and then me having a subscription service. I guess the main area of interest we've received around Lightning and kind of Bitcoin ecosystem is around like exchanges in terms of kind of like hooking them all up and like having this like like highway that they can actually use to move funds around. Like one example is like I remember like with like Bitcoin Cash, there was like scenarios where you couldn't move your money, right, because the block times were like 6 hours, something like that. Some people at that time were doing a little bit of arbitrage between them, but it took a very, very long time. So imagine if you could just basically instantly just move from like HIT BTC to like BitREX or whatever it was. That would have basically leveled out instantly and allowed people to kind of like have more efficient price discovery in the market. So I think that's a pretty cool scenario because then you can be doing things like buying and selling Bitcoin over Lightning, where I can get some money, I can like sell it from my USD account and do whatever, or I can withdraw that way. And I think that's pretty cool from the exchange's point of view because it makes them a little bit less custodial. So now if we add some of those other security features, if they're compromised, doesn't necessarily mean the hacker is basically like haha LOL, give me all the money. Now it's kind of like there's two of two multi-sig between them, and now at this point if they get hacked, I can close my channel out. So I think at that point it allows them to be a little more secure and allows them to be a little bit less custodial also, which maybe they'll like because if they're receiving a lot of kind of like regulatory pressure or it's like isn't a channel, it's a little bit different.
So one of the use cases I'm really excited about is actually just app development. We've seen a whole host of app developers building on various Lightning implementations, some here in the room, which is really exciting. For example, France. Apparently Lightning is huge in France. Who knew? So there are a ton of app developers here. And in some cases, like who even knows what they'll start building? But for example, there was a hackathon a few months back in France called Merkel Week, and the winning project used our Lightning implementation to do energy micropayments. We saw Retrieval, are they here? Yeah, in the room. So they did a really cool Lightning integration.
So basically they did it where it's like you have, basically these like prepaid mobile cards, and you can use Lightning to basically top off on that, which is a pretty cool use case. I guess continuing on that route, okay, never mind, it escaped me, so let's go.
And as I'm sure people here may very well know, it's not really that easy to build apps on, the low-level Bitcoin blockchain. So we're hoping that, oh really? Okay, well I said it then. So our goal is that, the various implementations can be a much easier way to build on top of Bitcoin. You can have instant confirmation, you can have the scalability as well, and you can have usability improvements too.
I think a good use case, even if it's a bit of a buzzword, but it might be machine-to-machine payments and in-game payments. Something I really would like to see. There's someone made a demo a few days ago with Minecraft and Lightning payments.
That's really cool.
And it's a good use case with it. And it's arguably easier to integrate Lightning payments for a website than it is to integrate Bitcoin payments because of the confirmation delays and the fees and so.
So my go-to use case is always basically monetizing content for content producers because I'm sort of getting fed up with watching ads. I work from home, so I watch a lot of YouTube.
So honest, I love it.
Oh yeah, my CEO is somewhere here. Basically, what Lightning allows you is very fast, very small end-to-end payments. So why not take advantage of that to cut out the middleman that is serving advertisements and just pay the guy that wrote the article that I'm reading now and I'm really liking some cents. That gives me the way to basically say thanks directly and for the content producer to actually get paid the full amount that I sent without having him having to flood me with flashy images and obnoxious stuff that follows me around and basically tells me 3 weeks later that I bought these shoes last week, so why don't you buy them again? Or all the ICO ads I see now on every website because apparently I'm susceptible for ICOs. So in that case, let's just use Lightning payments for a Flatter-like experience where I can just press a button and say thanks for the nice read and basically get some money to the guy that put his time into writing it.
So two things real quick before we move on to the next one. One is I think it's cool that we can start to kind of like monetize network services on the protocol itself. Someone made like a hackathon demo of this, but I think we can flesh out a little bit more, meaning that I could pay a node to serve me like a particular proof, because otherwise basically we're using nodes as kind of like a fused file system now, and they get no compensation. So we can do some cool things around that. And another thing is kind of like doing like instant swaps between other like cryptocurrencies, which is a pretty cool use case because you have that like pretty cool user experience, and it's a little more kind of like a more of an open shapeshift type of construct. And I mean there's kind of like middle ground between different designs there, but I think that's one cool scenario too.
Okay, so I don't know how much time we have left, but I want to. Oh, is Amir here? Okay.
Amir is here.
Welcome.
Amir.
Okay, so I'll ask one more question then. Okay, so my question is that as a researcher, I get lots of fantastic students, and I want to throw them amazing research ideas. What are the real outstanding problems where you need like a student to look at it for 6 months and hopefully produce something really cool?
Well, not a direct answer, but we actually get a lot of people coming to us and they want to learn more about the various implementations and Lightning Network generally. And we actually just created a developer website for our LND implementation. It's at dev.lightning.community, and we list a bunch of resources. And I think in many cases, a lot of researchers are looking to learn more about it. And there are a lot of resources by a variety of the people here where they can learn about that. And then one area, and that's something that we've worked on as well, I would say is potentially routing. There are a lot of interesting questions around that. Another one is in terms of the cross-blockchain aspect, if we can solve some of the problems of decentralization around cross-blockchain swaps.
So you wouldn't believe how often I had the same problem with my students. Them approaching you and asking, hey, I'd like to do something with cool tech A, and then you spend the next few weeks brainstorming. I think the best ideas probably come from the students themselves. If you want to build on Lightning itself, which is probably a bit hard if you only have 6 months, Elizabeth's routing and basically infrastructure questions are definitely a great idea. I'd suggest some more for master thesis though, or a PhD. By the way, doing a PhD on Bitcoin is cool. If you want to build, if you want to have a project that is sort of doable, I definitely try building applications on top of Lightning, and yeah, stuff like media streaming service, some mechanism of creating repeated payments, mechanism of creating incremental payments. All of these sorts, all of these projects are really cool. I'd also like to eventually integrate with the 402 HTTP code, which is payment required.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So, and there's a whole load of research to be done there, and yeah, just this huge spectrum of stuff that is actually enabled by Lightning is cool, and I think that's even more interesting than working on Lightning itself. And
I guess that's why it's a beautiful field.
Like there's a ton of stuff. I guess things on my radar are kind of different types of like multi-party channels that allow like multiple individuals to kind of like pool their funds. I think there's kind of like two types. There's like hierarchical and like non-hierarchical. Some cool stuff like that. Maybe some things around like delegation of disputes. If I can like say, okay, if I can't do it, then Patrick can do it, and maybe Doug can do it. Also things around different types of like HTLCs, like kind of conditional payments. How can we add different types of channels that we can actually communicate with each other? So basically like there's a ton of things around routing. How do we create like heterogeneous routing, because we don't all have to use the same routing protocol. Just like on the internet, there's not one protocol that's used. There's like open source path first, a bunch of different ones. So how can we actually have like a heterogeneous network that ties all this together? How do we allow people to have more flexible fee schedules? Can they be private? So there's a lot of things around that area. How can we? So I guess one cool thing is how can we move to like a disinspector protocol that's still partially private? That's kind of like an open question there, because otherwise you have to sacrifice a lot of things, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I guess more contract types, Oracle stuff, pricing, something.
Okay. And would you like to say anything? Or?
There's also probably work to be done, but it's maybe a bit more ambitious. Work to be done on routing and rebalancing, but that's...
Yeah, I'm not explaining why rebalancing is stupid, but I'd encourage everybody to take a look. It's always a great way of finding better stuff, to have new eyes that looking over the existing protocol, and maybe there's a whole new protocol that will come out of one of your theses. So if you're interested in working on Lightning, contact Patrick.
Or you as well.
Oh yeah, and if you need help, please reach out. We're online on IRC. We have a dev mailing list, and we definitely would like to get feedback, and will also help for any projects that you would be interested in doing. So we're approachable, hopefully.
Okay, so I'm now going to open up 2 questions to the floor, because I don't think we have very much time left, because we talk too much. So, yeah, you can go ahead first.
Yeah, of course. Let's suppose that we are user and we want to test immediately Lightning Network. So we would like to test something interoperable. So how can we know which implementation is compatible with the other, and when we know it's the right moment to install it and to try with other implementation?
So as mentioned before, I do have an integration testing framework up and running. It's public. Yeah, it's, but...
Do you remember the URL for the site?
cdecker.github.io/integration, lightning-integration/.
Well, the thing is, like, you need a better domain.
There's a YouTube recording if you need to just go back and look it up.
The thing is, like, I have a lot of like Lightning domains, so I can give you one. I just buy them all. So. Yeah, test.lightning.today.
Lightning.today is sounds good.
Yeah, I have that.
So we're really close at being compatible. So there's just a few things we need to test, and will give a joint announcement once we are there, and we'd encourage everybody to test out after that. If you're just interested in doing some experimentation right now, do it on testnet, not on mainnet, and the user interfaces shouldn't change too much over time. So everybody has an RPC interface. If you use the RPC interfaces, those will not change or will not change a lot. So you can already start right now building on top of those.
And there are also, in terms of front ends, a variety of front ends. I know Claire has one. I don't know if Jack Mullers is still here. Oh, there you are. Build Zap. Oh, what? You're not? Okay. Not Jack Mullers. Build Zap, a front end for LND. We actually have one that we built that is in testing within community members. So there are a variety of different ways to test the implementations on mainnet, even if you're not going to be into the command line.
And I think on one, just touch on that a little bit, like I think there's a lot of kind of like pretty large design twist around like what does the user interface look like? How much do you show them? How much do you hide? So I think even if you're not very technical as a developer, you can be doing live design work, like, things like animation, how you present the channels. Do you do some like cool like D3JS like graph thingy that shows like all the payments in real time or something? There's some cool things you can do there, so.
Yeah, speaking of interfaces, I will update my Google Blitz interface as well. So.
Oh yeah, he has like there's like some dashboards. He has like a dashboard, and I think in the future I think people also want like things like monitoring software to see like what their node's operating on, like the channels and everything. So there's a lot of software to be written both in the core protocol and also on top of it. Yeah.
And I have another question here.
So what's the status of people working on denominating channels in fiat to enable fiat speculation via Lightning? Hedging, especially.
Yeah. So Taj has something very cool on this line. He calls them like discrete log contracts. It's basically a way where you can kind of have like these like options, like I guess like more like futures on actually the Bitcoin price. So he has a constructor around like an oracle, which basically reveals like signs a certain state, and then using that you can basically say, all right, I'm going long on the yen, and you're going short on the US dollar essentially. So I think that's a pretty cool state. And the way he has set up, it's that. The oracle doesn't necessarily know if you're actually using their prediction, and he has it up such that also if they try to equivocate, basically like say like it goes down and it goes up, they lose their money. So I think that's a pretty cool use case because you could possibly just do that on like regular actual trading. You can also then possibly re-anchor the channel itself, so I can sell it to Patrick, right? So let's say I have like a partial position, I can sell it to him. Even beyond that, you can maybe do some like type of like USD denominated channels. So I would try to like rapidly update my channel to say I always want $50 in USD, and we're basically betting on like I'm going long in it or whatever. So I think that's a pretty cool area, kind of like synthetic assets.
Yeah, and more Lightning specific, we do while we are Bitcoin first, we do support other currencies as well. This whole stuff is all multi-realm. So if you have any coin, any blockchain that is pegged to the US dollar or any fiat currency, then you can use that natively in a Lightning channel as well. And with the once we have multi-coins inside of the daemons themselves, you can actually do can do atomic swaps between any currency pair as well. So that's not in the 1.0 spec, but it's upcoming.
Yeah, some parts are. Like in the onion writing, we have like a realm bit, so we can say go to Litecoin or go to Bitcoin or whatever. But so I mean, it's something we're thinking of, but we're basically focused on getting it out on one coin, one chain, because it's obviously easier not to monitor two chains at the same time.
Okay, thank you very much. And next up is Amir.
Thank you for the big introduction. All right, bear with me for a second. Yeah, sure. Oh, it's one monitor, yeah? Yes, sir. All right. Maybe I can put the two laptops. You want to? I guess that's Let me see if the video is right. I don't know if the audio works. I guess it is. Wait, the laptop crashed. Okay, it's just the USB stick. Oh yeah, so I should copy it. Which one is it? This one? Yeah.
My project.
Well, I need to read my laptop, so.
Skinner has.
All right, perfect. Oops. Doesn't really matter, does it? All right, how should I put this? Like this? All right. Yes, perfect.
So yeah, hopefully the computer will not collapse. We'll try. So yeah, this is the last presentation for this weekend. So I hope you enjoyed it so far. No, not sure. And yeah, so a big thank you for everybody being here. It's been amazing for us as well, the organizers, but also a big thank you to all the sponsors, without whom we wouldn't have been able to do this. So yeah, thank you very much, guys. Amir, this is yours.
All right. Thank you for having me here. I believe that ideas play an important role in shaping human history. What I want to talk about is how technology has been shaped by key ideas. In particular, how certain mechanical ideas of human society got mixed up with politics and technology. What I want to talk about is the free technology movement. It was a movement that showed great potential promise to liberate humanity. At the heart of it was the idea that technology offered a new way to construct a radically different kind of society that never before was possible in history. This movement was influenced by the visions of early scientists who believed in the power of computer technology, not just to serve large industry and military, but for everybody in society to have access to this new power. Influenced by the 60s counterculture, this movement went on to develop the first personal computers. But that's not the end of the story, because this radical vision mutated into the idea of self-regulating systems, which see human beings as objects managed by computer algorithms. In this vision, the value of human ideas to transform the world was diminished into a strange kind of consensus where everybody satisfies their personal desires. We now find ourselves in a strange, static dream world while dark forces are returning to threaten to penetrate our reality. And all of the dreams of the techno-utopists have played a role in creating this fake virtual world in which human beings driven by desire, devoid of all sense of higher purpose, become slaves to algorithms and vast computer intelligences. What is interesting about this story is the significance it has for Bitcoin, a project which was created for the purpose of creating a decentralized peer-to-peer money that cannot be controlled by governments and central banks, but which now finds itself monopolized by large mining cartels, a lack of vision to guide the project forwards, and an increasing irrelevance in a world facing a global breakup of power. Lastly, I want to explain my project to revitalize the free technology movement, to formulate a wider vision to restore back the potential of technology to transform human society, and train the next generation of revolutionary hackers dedicated to the cause of using technology to support the cause of freedom. My aim here is to find sponsors, find a place for establishing our Hackers Academy, to find partner organizations to develop new technology projects with, and to find people ready to dedicate themselves in advancing the free technology movement, people ready to be at the forefront of writing history. At the heart of this story lies a conflict between two men in 1968. One of them is called B.F. Skinner. The other is called Lewis Mumford. It was one moment when two ideas about how technology could be used to advance human society first started to take hold. There's a documentary from this time made in the mid-60s called Towards Tomorrow. And in this documentary, it described two possible future visions for human society. In a society where old forms of authority were declining, what would be the way that we could organize masses of human beings in a future society? One of these visions for the society was a world managed by an elite group of technocrats, a specialized elite, who managed a large population of passive human beings that constantly needed to be monitored and managed to be able to keep them happy. B.F. Skinner described a new way of controlling and ordering people. He posed the question that in this age of mass democracy and individualism, the old forms of coercion were simply not possible. And he put forward the idea of using reward. And he described an experiment where you have a cage with a pigeon inside, and the pigeon can be trained to peck symbols, buttons, and depending on which symbol they peck, they get a pellet of food. And in this way, by giving the pigeons the right reward for the correct behavior, they train the pigeon as a mechanical object. He then took this further, and he went to a mental hospital in San Bernardino in California. And in the mental hospital, what they did is they gave the mental patients a small reward every time they did a good behavior. And with this reward, when it was a lunchtime or a dinner time, the patients could sit at a nicer table. So inside the mental hospital, they created a new ordered hierarchy from a system of reward, in which people don't feel controlled, but feel empowered. Skinner describes this model as a model for the future of humanity. What's really interesting about this video by Skinner is that there's something very eerily similar to what we see today, in which there is a technocratic elite that has no interest in politics, only in managing human society to keep us happy, to keep everything stable, and to make themselves rich. A lot of this was powered in the mid-80s with the fake consumer credit to reward us as a form of social management, much like the experiment with the hospital, mental hospital. Lewis Mumford put forward an alternative vision for a society. In this video I'm going to show you, he first criticizes Skinner, and then he puts forward an alternative vision, where everybody in the society is a participant. Everybody is an active human being deciding their destiny.
Skinner has a very ingenious way of making a system of highly compulsive organizations seem as though it were a very humane one. This is his great and original contribution. The old-fashioned mechanical collectives, the mega machines, as I call them, were brutal. They used punishment as a way of enforcing conformity. Skinner and the psychological school that he represents have found a much better system than punishment. They first tried it out on animals, and now they're applying it to human beings. Reward them. Make them do exactly what you want them to do without the whip, but with some form of sugar-coated drug or candy, which will make them think that they're actually enjoying every moment of it. This is the most dangerous of all systems of compulsion. That's why I regard Skinner's Walden 2 as another name for hell. And it would be a worse hell because we wouldn't realize we were there. We would imagine that we were still in heaven. Most of the reactions that have taken place in art, including those that come under the head of the beatniks and the hippies, have some underlying sense in the reaction itself. But the remedy is part of the disease. The remedy, in fact, makes it easier for the institutions that now have their hold upon us to be even more compulsive and even more effective than ever before. If we don't care, if we drop out, if we lose ourselves in insane fantasy of some kind, whether a natural fantasy of the neurotic or the chemically induced fantasy of someone who takes drugs, we lose our possibility of restoring our own autonomy, of taking charge of our life, because this requires greater energy, greater effort than that which is required to live through the daily life of a machine worker. We have to become fully activated human beings, every part of us, tremendously alive and ready to take charge. And this can't be done by people who are in escape, people who are who form the habit of total rejection. We must know what we want, not just what we don't want.
There were many forms the computer could have taken. In the 1800s, the computer was proposed by Babbage and popularized by Ada Lovelace was seen as a tool that would have huge social uses and should be in the hands of many people. But when the computer was first developed, it was during World War II for cracking German codes for the military and for guiding ballistic missiles. So computers became a very large, centralized machine. And by the 80s, communities of hackers started to emerge who started to become fascinated with these huge machines, which at the time you had to get a time slice, you had to make an appointment to get some time to be able to use the machine. They started to get jobs near these computing devices because they wanted to know how these machines could work. And they started to build their own computers in their garages, in their houses, in the universities. And that was the birth of the personal computer. It's the reason why now we have laptops and telephones. And what happened was a lot of big companies started to come along, and they started to invest a lot of capital. And all of the hacker community, who up until that point had never seen money before in their life, started to throw themselves at the proprietary industry. And whereas before, the culture that had created this personal computer, this liberatory technology, really believed in the power to use technology to improve humanity for the better, which really believed in free technology and sharing techniques and code with each other, started to instead become siloed off. But there was one guy, which was Richard Stallman, who he was just a guy, but he said that he found this ethically wrong, and that if enough people got together, that we could give a challenge against the proprietary industry. He made that as a proposal to the community that, look, it doesn't have to be this way. That if we together put our energies, we can build our own operating system. And a lot of people at the time thought that he was crazy or his ideas were not feasible. This is an early video of Richard Stallman.
The project is to make all software free. Computers are sort of a fascinating build-it set where you can build things that you can then use to build more things.
What you're building is kind of alive. It has a life of its own. It's a little thing that follows all your commands.
It allows you to put together structures that you couldn't have put together before and carry this on until you're making structures thousands of times as big. I'd get up around 5 or so and come into the lab, read the messages people would send me. Then I'd go out to Chinatown with people and have a nice dinner. Then I'd come back and I would write programs all night, and around 7 in the morning I'd go to sleep.
Richard Stallman has been called the last pure hacker for choosing to remain at MIT despite the temptations of the commercial world, true to the spirit of the early hackers.
What they had in common was mainly love of excellence in programming. They wanted to make their programs that they used be as good as they could. They also wanted to make them do neat things. They wanted to be able to do something in a more exciting way than anyone believed possible and show, look how wonderful this is. I bet you didn't believe this could be done.
Philosophical phone freaks and early hackers believe that information and tools should be free, or at least available to serious seekers, and they openly shared their work with others. Some argue that the computer revolution could not have happened without that hacker ethic. Today, hackers are divided between the old values and the new. They can't agree whether source codes, the basic blueprints of a program, should be shared or not.
Hackers frequently want to look at code, like operating system listings and the like, to learn how it was done before them, because this is how they're going to learn to do it. And source should be made available reasonably to those sort of people, not to copy, not to sell, but to learn from.
Tools I will give away to anybody, but the product, that's my soul is in that product. I don't want anyone fooling with that. I don't want anyone hacking into that product and changing it, because then it won't be mine.
Imagine if you bought a house and the basement was locked and only the original building contractor had the key. If you needed to make any change, repair anything, you had to go to him. And if he was too busy doing something else, he'd tell you to get lost and you'd be stuck.
It's like somebody saying, looking at a painting and saying, well, I don't like that color over there, so I'll just take a can of paint and change it. That wrecks the whole painting. Okay, that changes everything that I did. And that to me is one of the greatest insults.
You're at that person's mercy, and you become downtrodden and resigned. That's what happens when the blueprints to a computer program are kept secret by the organization that sells it. And that's the usual way things are done.
Skinner has a very...
So in 1991, the cryptography was classified as a munitions, and Philip Zimmermann wrote the first freely available encryption software for anybody to use, and he uploaded it to the internet. And the American government arrested him, and he was facing a decade in prison. And what Philip Zimmermann did was to print the source code of PGP, of this encryption software, which he sold internationally, which is something that in America is protected under the First Amendment. And the American government, realizing that they couldn't continue with the case, dropped the case against Philip Zimmermann. And since that time, because of the action of Philip Zimmermann, software became classified as a form of speech, and cryptography became something that was widely available. It's now the reason why cryptography is available everywhere. And also, in the early 90s, Stallman had started to piece together his operating system. And by now, a community of people was emerging around him. It was the birth of Linux, a really important piece of technology, not just in the free technology world, but in general, in the entire technology space. Linux today plays a very key role. And there was a rise of a whole bunch of new movements, of the free software movement, of the hacker movement, of the crypto-anarchist movement, movements that were invigorated with creating a lot of new ideas and a lot of new concepts about how we could use technology to shape the world around us. These were collective movements driven by a shared sense of purpose. Towards the end of the 90s, there was Western society it was the baby boomer generation. The society became overly optimistic. It's something that Jean Baudrillard called the death of society and the obsession with desert-like forms, with the simulacrum. And Stallman's free software movement failed to capitalize on institutionalizing his movement. And what emerged was the open source movement. It was a movement that said, making this technology is not a question of freedom, it's not a question of ethics. It's simply that when you have access to the source code of a program, it's more efficient, it's cheaper, it makes better quality code. I don't think that's true, but that was their argument. And one of the main spokesmen of the movement was Eric Raymond, who released a book called The Cathedral and the Bazaar. And in that book, Eric Raymond described the open source development philosophy as an open bazaar. Everybody, where dozens or hundreds of people, a wide number of people, all collaborated in a horizontal manner, exchanging code. And he coined the idea that given enough eyes, all bugs are shallow. And the idea that when we have a piece of source code, if there are enough people all contributing a small amount of time and looking at the source code, then if there's a bug, that bug will be found. The idea that given a huge amount of people with a small amount of contribution from each, that we can develop projects and advance technology. Then what happened was the biggest event in modern Western history, which was the collapse of the Twin Towers. Two twin idols of capitalism, perfect inert reflections, reaching into the skyline of New York, which realized our deepest, most hidden desires to see the destruction of this passive, lifeless world. And what it represented was the return of the real, of dark forces that we'd ignored back to penetrating our reality. And in the early 2000s, we saw a lot of optimism and momentum for change. We saw the Arab Spring, we saw Occupy, we saw the Orange Revolutions. And in the technology world, we saw a lot of advances. There was a huge amount of optimism for Linux on the desktop. Every year, people were saying that this is going to be the year of Linux on the desktop. Everybody was waiting for that sudden single breakthrough. One of the major developments in the technology world was a confrontation that took place between Hollywood and a Manhattan programmer called Bram Cohen. Cohen was a programmer. He liked puzzles. He claimed to have Asperger's based on a self-diagnosis. What he developed was BitTorrent. And the concept started with sites like Napster and Kazaa that were centralized services that were shut down by authorities. Cohen came up with the concept that if enough people are downloading files and seeding them at the same time, then the more people that download a file, the more that file would become widely distributed in the network. And so that file would become shared in a self-regulating network. It was a big success, and the movie studios didn't know what to do about it. They were completely powerless in the face of this technology. And the idea of creating a functional self-regulating system outside of power proved itself. And it's something that became wildly popular among technologists. The next major development was the shutdown of the Pirate Bay, which led to the development of the Pirate Party. And this was a party that at one point had double digits in elections. They even entered into the European Parliament. There was a huge amount of momentum behind it. Wikipedia was also developed. The idea that given thousands and thousands of people all contributing small edits, one line at a time, that we could build this huge knowledge resource. And around this movement started to emerge the new priests of this internet-centric decentralization ideology, people like Yochai Benkler, academics who would go to conferences and sell this ideology to people. But then something strange started to emerge. Wikipedia released statistics about edits on the Wikipedia. And what we found is that it was a small group of dedicated people that wrote the majority of Wikipedia, people who really believed in the project and spent all of their time writing the majority of articles on the website. And when we started to look closer at these decentralized systems, what we observed was small groups of leaders surrounded by a wider community. In BitTorrent, it wasn't that everybody was seeding in the network. Most people, after they downloaded, didn't continue to run the software. In fact, it was a small group of users who wanted to challenge Hollywood and promote BitTorrent that would leave their software running, seeding torrents. And in open source, what we observed was that there were small groups of dedicated developers in a project surrounded by a wider community. And in fact, that what Stallman had done was not just to write Linux and put that in the community, but he had written articles, he had written manifestos, he had put forward a vision and an ideology that pulled together enough people and drove this movement of hackers forwards. So what drove these projects for freedom was not a new model or a new technique, but it was a vision that pulled together enough people to realize an idea. To understand why Occupy and the Arab Spring and the Orange Revolutions and the Pirate Party and a lot of these movements that had a huge amount of will and momentum behind them failed, it's really instructive to understand what happened in Egypt. In Egypt, huge amounts of youth started to mobilize through Facebook, and they started to go to the center in Cairo to throw out the military dictatorship. And a huge amount of people died in that struggle. And after they threw out the military dictatorship, the youth then sat down and they said, okay, now what are we going to do? What's next? And so they started to discuss. And into that came a group of people with a vision, with an ideology that was well organized and able to pull together enough strands of the society behind them that they could put their vision into power. And that was the Muslim Brotherhood. And then the same youth who had kicked out the military dictatorship came back to the square to ask the military dictatorship to come back and rescue them from the Islamists. At the same time, Satoshi developed Bitcoin. I remember on Satoshi's early website, he described it as a peer-to-peer form of money that cannot be controlled by central banks and governments. And it's something that attracted libertarians and cryptographers and hackers. Bitcoin is kind of a free technology project that was a little late to the party. Yet, interestingly, it finds itself in the same place as the movements that have preceded it. The fundamental problem with Bitcoin is not a problem of this or that missing technology. It's a problem of a lack of vision, a lack of how this technology is, and it's not just about Bitcoin, it's something to do with the wider technology movement. We have to understand the global situation now. Humanity is facing a future with a huge amount of suffering. We are facing threats from terrorism, from immigration. There's the rise of new ideological movements. ISIS just went and took a city in southern Philippines for more than a month, which is right next to Indonesia, the biggest Muslim country in the world. And in Europe, the New Right movement is getting very strong, organizing training camps, becoming well organized, getting into political power and well funded. This is the reality of our situation now. And we need to think about how these technologies that we make, where do they situate themselves in the wider global context? So now in Rojava, there is also a really important movement with the ideology of democratic confederalism, which is the way forward from anarchism and offers a really good analysis of what is the current society and what is the crisis that we're facing. And now, in that place, revolutionaries from all around the world are going and learning the methodology and the ideology of this movement. And it's a new emerging movement outside of any one person's control, but new forces that can be harnessed. And what we have to understand is that the anarchist movement and the hacker movement are something that are deeply connected. The problem with anarchism is that it has failed in its potential to advance humanity forwards. It's simply an ideology that no longer is able to work. But what we have now in Rojava is a libertarian revolution of 5 million people. What is democratic confederalism? It's an ideological movement that opposes the state as a mechanical worldview and sees nature as something that is divine, that seeks to restore the balance back between the internal and subjective and the external material worlds, that freedom comes from reaching our destiny as human beings, not simply through pleasure seeking. And that liberalism is the destruction of a free society, and a better humanity is not simply a happier humanity, but a stronger, freer humanity. the crisis in the West is not simply an economic crisis, but a social crisis. We're facing a cultural issue, not a deep cultural issue. All of the ideas in the hacker movement, such as bit law, digital governance, cryptographic economy, decentralized organization, new economic models, new technical tools, unless we are able to take all of these concepts and put them into a plan, with a sense of direction, that we can place these into practice, then it's something that's going to be lost. And now, what has presented itself is a massive opportunity for the hackers to put their ideas into practice. So right now, what we are doing is we're building a hacker team. And there's 3 tasks that we have to do. The first is we have to do a study of all of the ideas and concepts in technology. From this study, we have to develop a long-term plan. And thirdly, we have to devote ourselves to building the technical base of this new emerging democratic confederalist movement. We have to create revolutionary hackers dedicated to the cause. If we don't, then all of the technology that we're making is outside of society, it's a toy, and what is relevant in this world is not making new products to fill the spaces in the environment around us, but using technology to shape politics and influence the world around us. This revolution in North Syria of Rojava is the biggest opportunity in the entire history of modernity. And through this, we can give direction to the hacker movement. One of our main projects is our Bitcoin project. We have a nation of 5 million people. And there is a financial situation where they're under financial embargo. They don't have a financial infrastructure, so they use paper money, and the Syrian lira is inflating massively. Because there's an embargo, so you can't send money in and out. Also, there's a project to create a decentralized economy. And there's a lot of real concrete uses for Bitcoin. And also, the ideology of the revolutionary nation is in line with the vision and values of Bitcoin. But when we start to look at deploying Bitcoin, what we realize is that Bitcoin is not ready. There's a lot of new things that need to be developed in Bitcoin to actually make it so it's able to be deployed on a scale of 5 million people. So we are assembling a project to deploy Bitcoin as the national currency of Rojava. And what we want to create is new products in practical use on a large scale, products that solve real problems and serve the cause of freedom. And towards this goal, we're assembling a team of 20 hackers dedicated for 2 years. And we're looking to establish links with companies and sponsors to make this happen. And the first step is to establish a hackers academy in Greece to train groups of revolutionary self-sufficient hackers that we're going to deploy on projects. So what our needs now is partners, sponsors, space, support. And our first plan is to set up exchange shops and localized wallets in Bitcoin, where people can buy vouchers and use Bitcoin to create a local Bitcoin market. And also, what we have to do is we have to create brochures and lots of information. So once this system gets bigger, then we also need to think of bigger financial infrastructure. So one of the things is paper wallets. And at the moment, the paper wallets cost, for 100,000 paper wallets, cost $6,000. Unfortunately, the counterfeiting measures on the paper wallets aren't very well made. And there needs to be a lot of research that's done into that. Also, there's a small USB device called the ESP12, which can be programmed with MicroPython and C, and it has an onboard Wi-Fi, and you can fit modules for radio. And through that, you can create a large-scale payments network with cheap consumer devices. It costs $5 each for people to transact Bitcoins. There's also a big market to make Bitcoin, because to send money between Rojava and Istanbul currently costs 5%. Later also, we can create a plastic card system where we print cards, and also establish a payments network using radio systems. Also there needs to be a lot of development and investigation into Lightning networks and other technologies. So yeah, this is, now what I basically have is I have a laboratory that if I take a group of people, that I can create all different kinds of technology projects, and a lot of the concepts that we've been theorizing for a long time, we can see if they actually work practically, for real, because there's also a lot of need in it, and there is the project of the pirates to create liquid democracy. There is a system of local councils in every neighborhood, which a lot of these digital platforms are being developed for many years. We can deploy them. And there's also, the economy is being based off of cooperatives. So all of the ideas about economic management, about collective management of resources, about using cryptography and currencies to manage cooperatives. These are all things that we can deploy. But what it's going to take is a group of people who's doing this research, who's going deep, not only into developing new concepts, but looking back into the literature about what is the history of the movement, where are we situated, and also what are the concepts and how we can apply them towards our goal. So yeah, I'm going to finish my talk on that. Does anybody have questions? Yeah, I kind of stopped halfway. I didn't write an ending, so I just kind of just ended. Finito.
Questions?
So you spoke in the first person plural. Who's already with you?
I have about 4 hackers, but I have a lot of people that want to come join me, but most people, I tell to them that this is something you seriously have to think about to be sure that you're ready. But I have no problem to find people. I have a lot of people that want to come join me.
Hi, Amir. Thank you very much for speaking. I would like to thank you for your message. It's a beautiful message. Thank you very much. And your work is it's great too. You need funds, you need partners. We have a new mechanism called ICO, you know. Why do you think, for example, this kind of project for leverage some money, some people on your project, is it possible? Is it something that you think?
To make an ICO, yeah, it's a good idea. I probably should do it. It's already been suggested to me twice. So.
Hi, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation, really heartfelt, so thank you so much. Maybe you want to tell, because there's YouTube here, I think it's a live stream, maybe you want to tell people where to go to find out more information and how to get involved. So they should go to amirtaki.org. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's my contact.
Okay, thank you so much.
No worries. It says Signal, but it's also WhatsApp, Telegram. You know, I have all of them.
Any other question? No. You do?
Thank you. Awesome talk, and really cool to hear your references to all these people that I actually have worked with, Yochai Benkler, Barm Cohen, all those folks. So one of the major themes of this conference has been taking the cypherpunk vision, within the Bitcoin community. But I wanted to know, what is your vision to continue this on in the future, the cypherpunk movement broadly?
So I think Stallman did a really important thing when he came and he defined the 4 essential freedoms. I think those 4 essential freedoms can be boiled down to 3 freedoms, which is the ability to read the source code, and modify the source code, and to distribute the source code. What Richard Stallman did is he said that if a piece of software meets these definitions, then it is free technology, it's free software. What I'm saying is that while this may be a requirement for free technology, the concept of free technology is something that actually goes further. And the potentiality of this concept that was first initiated by Stallman has exhausted its potentiality to advance the free technology movement. So now, what we need to do is we need to start a new philosophical movement, looking at technology, understanding as technologists the totality of the human society that we're living, with an understanding of history, philosophy, sociology, to develop new concepts around technology, and in particular, what is free technology, or technology that serves the cause of liberating humanity. A lot of the projects that technologists have been working on for years, I remember there was a time when there was a huge amount of optimism about the internet, that if only we could get the internet to everybody, suddenly society would be a lot more educated. What we've actually seen is that that's not the case. People don't use the internet to challenge themselves, to move upwards in the world. Actually, the internet has become another form of escape. And a lot of these technologies or visions that are masquerading themselves as having some kind of liberatory power for Bitcoin actually are establishing new sinister forms of control. So I can talk about a lot of different projects, but for instance, if we think about the Internet of Things, it is essentially the idea of an environment surrounded by lots of computers, all communicating with each other, decentralized. But for me, that is a really sinister vision of a future in which human beings exist as passive objects in between a technological, inorganic world. Instead, how we should be thinking about technology is that how can we take control of this technology and use it for our own gains? So one of the essential concepts for freedom is that to be a free human being, you need to be autonomous. You need to be able to satisfy your own needs, to be able to clothe yourself, to feed yourself. Obviously, that's not something that is fully realizable, because otherwise we would return back to the forest. We live in a civilization. We make a compromise because we like to have nice clothes, food to eat, a warm place to sleep. But what we can do is think about new forms of technology that can create a more liberatory society. And in particular, the idea that when we use a piece of technology, that technology is also using us. It's not just... So that's why Lewis Mumford is important, because Lewis Mumford advanced the idea of that there were 2 forms of technology. And he, in one of his books, in this book, The Myth of the Machine, he goes into the history of science and technology, and he talks about how there were many different modes that science and technology could have taken. And he describes monotechnics and polytechnics. And the monotechnics is a type of technology that is just technology that exists for its own sake. And as it advances, enslaves humanity. For instance, if we think about factory, it's something that is a giant mechanical device which requires mechanical human beings inside of that to operate. So it's something that enslaves human beings in order to improve material conditions. But Lewis Mumford also talks about polytechnics, which is about a technology which situates itself in a wider comprehension of the society in terms of sociology and philosophy and history and so on, to think what are the consequences of the technology we're deploying, and how are we using it to further human society. So when we think about technology, one of the important things I think that we should be thinking about is that when a piece of technology, when we don't know how a piece of technology works, or when we're not able to fully utilize that technology to its maximum, then that technology exerts a form of power over us. And so what is really important is technological comprehension. So it's not just enough that the source code is there and that it exists, but it also has to be something that people have to study. And there should be an active movement of people who are seeking to understand and to use the technology in service of humanity. When we talk about the hacker movement, what is really important to understand is that in the 70s, from the 80s, is that there were always two strands within the hacker movement. There was one strand which was about building complex technological systems to serve the cause of humanity. And what we have to understand is that when we build something like Linux is not easy work, it's hard work. People dedicate their lives and make great sacrifices to write free software source code. They give up a lot in their lives, and you spend a lot of time discussing with people on mailing lists, writing documentation, studying and writing code. It's not necessarily a fun thing. There's a lot of satisfaction, but it's not something that we do for fun. But there was another strand in the hacker movement, which was about random creative acts of self-expression. And what we've seen is that the movement of Stallman was a large-scale collective movement driven by a vision of building something bigger, let's get together and let's work towards building something big. But what has happened now is that what has overtaken the hacker movement is this other side of the hacker movement. That now, whereas hack labs before were spaces where people worked on political technology, now have turned into hacker spaces where you can go in and you can find a guy, and he spent 6 months to make cat ears that tilt when you tilt your head. And people with huge amounts of skill wasting it, making toys. In ancient Egypt, in the Alexandrian library, it was the world's biggest library that had ever existed in antiquity. People used to come from all over the world to come read books there. And the head of the library was a woman called Hypatia. She was an astronomer, a physicist, a mathematician, a philosopher, and she was the head of the library. In that time, with the status of women, she was the head of the Alexandrian library, the biggest library in the world. And what happened is that a huge Christian mob came and burnt the whole thing down. And they took her, they raped her, they murdered her. And always, when people tell this story, they tell it as a story of the Christian mob, the anti-intellectual Philistine mob, who burnt down this extremely valuable resource of human knowledge. But there's another side to this story. What we have to understand is that they had high science and they had high technology. And this library is basically in between as a big temple in the center of the city, while people around them were starving, were living in extreme poverty, extremely harsh, oppressive social conditions. And while people were living like that, these scientists had a huge amount of science and technology, but they never thought, how could I use this to help the people around me? How could I use this to serve the society? They had steam power, but they didn't use steam power to decrease the toil that people had to do. They used it to make toys to amuse the king. This is the same moment. It's like this is an existential moment for the hacker movement.
Thank you. Okay. We did it. So, before you leave, I have a few people to thank. The first are you, because, I mean, I know many of you came from abroad, so first thing I'd like to ask is, who does not live in Paris here in this room? Okay, that's pretty good. And I also know a lot of people were very last minute, so who bought flights less than, let's say, 2 weeks ago? Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So really thank you guys. It's really heartwarming. So for us as well, the organizers, it's great to have you. So the first thanks I would like to give is for the people who organized the conference. So that's not just me, even though I've been talking a lot. Elizabeth, please. And where is Pierre? Pierre, can somebody go get Pierre?
Can we find Pierre? Because Pierre did not sleep for many days in putting together this event and really I'm so impressed with everything he made happen. Like the party last night, that venue was so awesome, and then we all got like free beers. So please put your hands together to thank Pierre. Our tireless organizer.
I'm putting the website. So people can take picture of you and remember you forever. They haven't seen you much this weekend, but you are the main guy, so.
Hopefully you'll get a lot of sleep this coming week.
And I'll put it full screen even. Okay, so now, all the speakers, I would really, really like to thank you. I know many of them are gone already because they had to take flights and stuff. But could the speakers that are still in the room come here as well, please?
Speakers.
And just so you know, everybody is a volunteer here. So this is 100% a community event. Nobody is paid. The speakers are all volunteers as well.
All volunteer organizers, people just burning the midnight oil.
Burning time, burning money, burning everything, but at least we had an epic event, so thank you again.
And then, thank you so much to all our sponsors. Do we want to bring up?
Yeah, so if anybody is a sponsor here, could we have one person per sponsor?
Just stay, maybe we'll do a photo. And so many sponsors really came through at the last minute, as this wasn't a volunteer event as it goes. So thank you so much for making this all possible.
Yay, sponsors.
Woo! Thank you, sponsors. And then last but not least, the volunteers.
And the volunteers, yeah.
Should we bring them up?
If they are not in the back.
They might all be volunteering, the rest of them. A bunch of them got here at 7 a.m. and were really super dedicated. Maybe some of them are taking a nap right now. Is there anybody else we need to?
So we need to thank Nicolas Baca because he spent a lot of time organizing with us as well, but he had to take a train right now. So he's both a sponsor, a speaker, well, I don't know how you say 3 things. He's right.
Organizer, putting little goodies in our bags.
Organizer, and sponsor, so that's pretty amazing. So thank him, but he's not here right now, so that's sad.
And then also thank you to the Crypto Affair and the general French community in Bitcoin. You guys are awesome, and you were super supportive, so thank you.
And the very last thing before the beers, I have to give a small gift to every sponsor. So if you're a sponsor, please stay here. Little gift to give you.
That's it. See you guys next year, hopefully.
And live Twitter also, not just
What?